Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. My name is Chase.
And I'm Joby.
And this is the Overrun.
You are now looking at the engine for the 2023 Land Rover, Range Rover Sport. Hang on. Sorry, the 2023 Land Rover, Range Rover Sport SE Dynamic, which is a 3-liter supercharged and turbocharged 6-cylinder, which produces 395 horsepower and 400 pound-feet of torque. It gets about 21 combined miles per gallon, both with city and highway, obviously doing a little bit better on the highway. But obviously this is not meant to, save the trees or the turtles or anything. It's really here to be a somewhat potent powertrain for those people that are driving to the mall in their brand new Range Rover. And it does that, and we'll get a lot more into that in the drive impressions later on in the video.
Now let's talk hard numbers. This, as it sits right here, is $100,085 delivered, spec'd, done and dusted. That includes a few options, including the cold climate pack with the heated windscreen, washer jets, and steering wheel, a technology pack, and we'll talk about why you shouldn't order that in the interior segment, and the 23-inch Style 5135 wheel package, which is a whopping $2,200. However, those numbers are nothing compared to what we view as this car's biggest competitor, the Porsche Cayenne. Now, Now, for reference, the Porsche Cayenne starts at, these are polarized, now I can't see. The Porsche Cayenne starts at $79,200 for the base V6 with 342 horsepower. However, the Cayenne S is probably a slightly more apt competitor at $95,700, and for that you get a big fat V8 with 400 plus horsepower. So we'll keep that in mind throughout the review and contrast this with Porsche's take on the luxury sports SUV.
All right, we are now in the rear of the Range Rover Sport, and as you can see, there's quite a bit of room back here. Plenty of room to fit, I don't know, soccer gear, groceries, whatever it is you might need for you and your family within the Range Rover Sport. Now, there's a couple of cool things to note back here. For one, there are these switches right here on the right-hand side that actually will automatically raise or lower to the rear seat. So if you need to create some more room here in the back, you can do that with just a press of a button or a flip of a switch. And then you have these other buttons here that will actually raise and lower the ride height of the rear of the car, which is cool, and I'll demonstrate that for you right now. So I'm going to raise it up. You can start to hear it and maybe even see me actually rising like I'm a Greek god. And then we can obviously go back down, and it goes quite low actually as well. It almost slams the car like it's a little lowrider or something, which is cool. And it's super useful, especially if you're trying to lift something heavy into the back. It's nice to be able to raise or lower to whatever you need.
All right, inside the brand new Range Rover Sport. Now, this has been refreshed for the current model year, which is great. And it includes some new updates. There's Land Rover's new floating display cluster that uses their same infotainment system, more on the technology in a moment. And there's been some light changes throughout the interior to make it a little bit more current. The materials quality in here is very typical of Land Rover, which is to say it's great. I love this purple leather, that's very nice. It's sort of a red, wine, purple, red kind of hue. It's two-tone on the steering wheel. The paddles back here are metal, which is a very nice touch. Everything in here feels really nice. The stitching is nice. I'm a big fan of the armrests because it makes it easy to assume this position on the steering wheel, which is great when you're using the auto steer. And there's good storage up here as well. This center console is extremely deep. I have a full-size water bottle and our GoPro case in there right now. There's also a very deep console right here that has a couple of USB ports in it, and a little drawer that pulls out for some cup holders. And then you can also close it, and it has some nice black wood veneer on here, which is one of the options on this car. There's also a wireless charging pad and the stereotypical, or not stereotypical, atypical Range Rover split glove box deal, where there is a lower glove box as well as an upper glove box. Now, as a last thing to note, I want to talk about some of the build quality in this car. Overall, it's very fantastic. The door handles feel luxurious and solid. Everything that you touch does feel very solid. Even the somewhat shaky armrests feel pretty solid. However, the auto rear seat drop function that Joby had discussed in the cargo segment does fail intermittently. We've noticed that. We've driven this car on 2 separate occasions and it's happened both times. There's also already some creasing in the leather here. This car has 9,216 miles on it only. Press cars live hard lives, but it's definitely something to note. I feel like maybe there are some aspects of this interior that could wear faster than others. Other than that, though, it is a very nice place to be. I would put the interior material selection and quality on par with that from Porsche. Now, let's talk tech. This is the corporate Range Rover, Land Rover infotainment experience with voice control, as you can see, which has just come up. Let's see how many times that happens. As you can tell, there's wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, which is very nice if you don't want to use the standard system. However, if you do, the map system is very functional, and the screen, as you can see, responds to your touch very quickly. There's also a number of detailed vehicle settings in here. You can set your ride height to auto, normal, or off-road. And there are also a number of features in here, including auto brake hold, engine start stop, and some other items. The climate controls are located below. This, like the Defender, has the sort of push-pull function for the climate functionality. One thing to note, this does not have cooled seats. I don't know if it's an option, we'll have to look, but you know, for $100,085, that's definitely something that you're kind of missing out on. Down here is the switch that you will use to control all of your drive modes. As you can see, there is a dynamic, eco, comfort, grass, gravel, snow, mud and ruts, sand, and wade mode, which really jacks up the suspension height and uses the car's super cool, let's get to it, the car's super cool wade sensing system to show you how much water you are currently at. This is certainly a much more off-road capable option than the Porsche Cayenne ever really has been. I'm including the Trans-Siberia there. It's got various locking differentials. And now let's talk about the center gauge cluster. There's a lot of adjustability here. It's on par with most other cars in the segment. I can change the gauge cluster to any number of other display layouts. For example, I can go to a full screen map, which I just flubbed. I can go to a full screen map, which is very nice if you are using the factory navigation system, which again works very well. One thing to note that I'm not a super huge fan of over here is the piano black on the haptic buttons. The buttons work fine. You're never going to accidentally push something, unlike in some certain Volkswagen products, but you are going to immediately cover it with fingerprints, and the same is true of the center console. I don't know if that's something you can fix by configuring a different material selection here, but it's definitely something to be mindful of if you're a little bit of a clean freak like I am.
And now for the back seat of the Range Rover Sport. Obviously, all the same leather that we saw in the front seats are going to continue back here, and these seats are quite comfortable. I could imagine sitting back here for an extended period of time and having no issues. On top of that, there's plenty of legroom, as you can see. There's tons, and there's even more legroom in here than you would find in a Porsche Cayenne. But one other thing I wanted to touch on in terms of materials is it's actually not all leather back here. We had this nice sort of woven, almost fabric-like material, which kind of breaks up the constant Merlot leather, and it looks quite nice as well. One of the things I wanted to touch on as well are the power adjustable seats. So these seats have a little switch on the door, and you can actually recline or go up however you want. There's not a ton of adjustability, but there is some, which is nice. But as Chase mentioned, it sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, and we've had that experience on 2 separate occasions, so just keep that in mind. Last thing is there's a ton of connectivity back here. We got 2 USB-C ports, a regular household style port as well, heated seats, and everything else. We also have these very convenient little sunshades, which I guess if you have kids or babies or something like that, it would be nice to block out the sun. But yeah, that's the back seat of the Range Rover Sport. Let's talk the driving impressions of the Range Rover Sport. Now, obviously this is a luxury SUV, so it's not gonna have some sporty driving feel or, you know, super tactile steering, which is fine, because again, that's what it's, you know, it's not really designed for any of that. But, you know, with the air suspension that is offered here in the Range Rover Sport, the ride quality is incredibly smooth. Now you can, you know, change the drive modes. If you switch it up to dynamic, that stiffens up the suspension a little bit. Yeah, it makes it feel a little bit sportier, but in general, the ride quality and comfort is really high because of that air suspension. And we also looked at that in the Land Rover Defender that we reviewed, I don't know, 6 months back now. But yeah, overall, the overall driving is just as you would expect. It is, you know, obviously a bigger SUV and feels floaty, but which is honestly nice for a car like this. You don't want to be wrestling the wheel or the steering wheel of a big SUV like this. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. But let's now move on to some of the driver assist systems. So as you might expect, there are quite a few in here. You have adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, blind spot monitoring, and all of the modern assist features that you come to either love or hate, but definitely expect in a new vehicle. So the adaptive cruise control is absolutely fantastic in here. It's not jerky and doesn't slam on the brakes all of a sudden, obviously, unless it absolutely needs to for some reason, but it's a very, very smooth experience, and it's generally, you know, works very well. It also allows you to come to a complete stop, and then allows you to resume it again once traffic has started back up again, which I absolutely love with, you know, more modern adaptive cruise control. Now, with lane keep assist, the story is a bit different. Lane keep assist is pretty bad in this car. It ends up, rather than actually keeping you in the center of the lane, it really ping-pongs you between either side of the lane rather than just keeping you in the middle, which is super annoying and just, I don't know, adds to the jerkiness of the, you know, overall experience. It is not great. One other thing I wanted to mention is the Meridian sound system. We didn't touch on this in the interior review or portion of this video, but this does have a very, very nice and sort of premium sound system, which is the Meridian sound system. Overall, I think it doesn't, you know, I'd say it's fairly neutral in terms of overall profile. It's not super bass heavy or lacking in any, you know, specific area of the overall, I don't know, sound curve, if you will. That's probably the wrong word, but that's just the word I'm going to use for now. But yeah, overall, the driving experience is great. There's tons of storage in here. The front seats, I mean, the interior is really, really nicely appointed with the nice leather and other materials like the fabric I touched on earlier. But yeah, overall, it's a great experience in here. All the buttons that you need for the climate controls are within, you know, I don't know, a few inches from what you need, and they're all physical buttons, which is very, very nice, which makes it much easier to use, and honestly doesn't, you know, require some huge learning curve, you know, once you, if you know, buy this car new. So yeah, overall, the driving experience here in the Range Rover Sport is quite nice, and I would say it probably stacks up, you know, fairly well with the competitors. You know, we just went over some bumps right there, and it wasn't like I was, you know, bottoming out the car or had any horrendous sounds or wasn't uncomfortable. It's a very, very smooth and enjoyable experience here in the Range Rover Sport. And now for the conclusion of the 2023 Land Rover Range Rover Sport SE Dynamic. Yeah, I guess go ahead, get us started.
Yeah, so there's one thing that we should note real quick right here at the end that we didn't get to in the interior segment. That is the technology package. It's $1,795. It comes with a camera embedded in the rear view mirror, which I personally just find kind of disorienting and not all that useful unless you really need to check your blind spots. The heads-up display and a 110 volt 3-pronged outlet in the rear seat cluster stack. I just don't think it's worth it. It's $1,800, and if you knock that off the price of this car, you're under $100,000, and that helps it compete much better with the Porsche Cayenne S, which, as spec'd, right, is $97,000.
Yeah, and ultimately, obviously, changing the spec changes the price of this car and would obviously change the overall value proposition of the Range Rover. But ultimately, for me, I mean, this car is fine. It doesn't do anything that I want it to do, and I don't know, it's just, another box that's on 4 wheels that you can drive around and you'd be perfectly happy in. The air suspension is great, the ride quality is great, which is to be expected for a luxury SUV like this. Overall, I think it's good, but it's really dependent on you, the buyer, and what you want.
Yeah, I feel that it doesn't really miss any beats, but it also doesn't really hit any strong highs with me either. And that's okay. Sometimes what you want and sometimes what other buyers might want is just a really nice toaster. And that's kind of what this is. It's something to get us from point A to point B. It's got Wi-Fi connectivity. It's got all of the modern comfort and convenience features you would expect. Yes, some of the technology is a little weird. Yes, there are some, minor quality niggles that I don't love, but for the money, you're getting what you pay for. As a final parting word of advice, it's definitely a good idea to try not to own one of these out of warranty, given the general reliability reputation that this brand has. And with that in mind, thank you again so much for watching. We really do appreciate it. Please like, notification bell, subscribe. Those 3 little things help us keep bringing you videos. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Also, we're driving super big V8 Jeep. Yeah.